Thank you all for your patience. Sorry we ran a little late. Call ourselves to order, meeting of the West Newbury Board of Selectmen, November 30th, 2020. The time is now, I don't see it, 7:14. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is also accessible by remote participation. It is a Zoom meeting. The phone number for the Zoom is 646-558-8656, and the meeting is 999-323-64961, and the passcode is 751-248. Thank you. For a few announcements before we get started. The winter parking ban is going to, winter is coming, and it's going to be starting. The parking ban starts on-street parking in the evening. Ban takes place starting December 1st. So don't leave your car on the street during the winter. The next announcement, a good one. The West Newbury Police Department received a grant from the Edgar J. Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. This was an amount of approximately $19,000 for the purchase of live scan fingerprint system. I don't know very much about it, but I guess you can get pretty much an instant result if someone has had a prior fingerprint taken. Do you know much about it, Angus? I don't.
No, I don't.
Okay. So thank you to the police department and everyone involved in getting that, being successful with that grant. Next item, the Community Preservation Committee is still entertaining proposals for things that would be eligible to be evaluated by the CPC and for ultimately be evaluated at town meeting for CPC funding. The deadline for sending those applications into is January 2nd of 2021, and any group that would be interested in doing that, I would suggest contacting the CPC. They will give you assistance in getting the applications filled out. One of the nice events that West Newbury hosts, unfortunately this year we are not going to have a tree lighting ceremony. However, the town tree will on the training field will be lit this year. We just will because of restrictions on gatherings. There will not be a ceremony when that happens, unfortunately. And finally, anyone that wants to keep up on town announcements, please subscribe www.newbury.org/subscribe. First order of business are some new things relevant to the COVID-19 situation. Angus, do you want to summarize these?
Sure. So just briefly, what's in your packet, there's some information that we received last week regarding communities that are setting up their own testing programs. I don't want to get ahead of the health department on this, and there is a staff level meeting that I'll be part of tomorrow with the health agent and a member of the Board of Health. So if there's any specific information that comes out of that meeting tomorrow, I'll let you guys know. But for now, I just circulated the guidance based on what we had received last week. The second item is, very broad update that we received from the administration each, pretty regularly. So there are a lot of links in there. A lot of information. The other memo, this is more kind of specific to our community with the CARES Act. Just further guidance as we continue to do the filings there, both for anticipated expenses and actual expenses. And they've issued recently, just last week, more guidance on the reconciliation round. So we'll be working with that. We had a staff meeting last week to reinforce with people the, with department heads, the importance of cost tracking, which I think has gone well. The next COVID related item in your packet is something that's not on for tonight for a decision, but we were contacted last week with a question about basketball and whether use of the Page School gymnasium would be allowed or not. So that is something the board, would like to set up a meeting in the near future, joint meeting with the Board of Health and the Selectmen to talk about that question. There's a lot to that, as you can see from what's in the packet. So I think that's all I have in terms of COVID information.
So it just, I would just, so that we can at least talk about this, do we, I would ask the other board members, because this is very new information to all of us. We just got the material. Do we want to have some kind of a meeting related to these requests for the use of the basketball court at the Page? How do the other board members feel about this?
Can I speak to that first?
Yeah, go ahead, Glenn. Yes.
My first question would be why, and that's not pro or con. If we do, only a very constructive meeting, not a meeting filled with we're ruining children's life by not having basketball. We think basketball is safe. We think all that stuff, because I don't think that will be productive. I would entertain a very productive meeting. It just, they're not allowing, or the state is not allowing even gym classes. So how could that, actually, I think that you might be able to social distance, play ball or whatever, do exercises, in separate parts of a gym and social distance properly. How could our health agent recommend or even allow basketball? So I don't know if it's going to be productive. I guess, Archie, is my bottom line. Then I think we should. But I'm hearing there's petitions being around. I mean, I want to have basketball, but because of COVID and because of public health, I don't think we can at this time. And I will, follow the recommendations of our Board of Health on this, because I have no real, health or COVID related experience in making sure that people stay safe in that respect, other than following, what's outlined by the governor and the state and our local officials.
Yeah, I could anticipate the meeting not being productive with a lot of ill feelings, and I don't want to create that.
And it doesn't mean that I don't have feelings and I don't empathize with everybody, because I do. But it's just, I'll be glad to have any meeting that anybody wants, as long as it's going to be productive and we just don't hear the same stuff over and over again that's not related basically to the safety and welfare of the children and the people that are going to be participating in this.
Rick, what do you think? We're not talking about the issues at all. Do we even want to have a meeting about this? That's a public meeting about this. That's the question.
Yeah, I don't see a positive outcome of a public meeting, quite honestly, in this case. I mean, public meetings are always important, but people are going to be asking for and demanding things that I don't think we can responsibly offer at this point. And I don't see it going anywhere other than south really fast.
What about asking people if they have any thoughts or if they have any concrete evidence or stuff like that, that they give it to us in writing? So then we could review those things with our health agent prior to it, so we can come up with some educated discussions about that and some educated and scientific discussions about people's requests ahead of time. And then we, we do it on Zoom, and then Angus, lets people in only if necessary or something like that. But we're not basically entertaining questions or comments other than them in writing beforehand.
That's a reasonable way to do it. I mean, just the whole concept of even entertaining the conversation right now is crazy because the situation is getting worse by day, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's just I think it's just completely irresponsible for us to consider it. But if somebody has good evidence, yeah, sure, give it to us in writing.
And then we can redo our research and have good concrete discussions at that meeting, rather than just saying, oh, we have to get back to you. Okay. You know what I mean by that? And then just, have everything come in and then have Angus, have Paul look at it, and then we can discuss it as a group. Because we understand this is a huge part of people's lives. So I think that would be more productive of dealing with it.
I think that's a good solution. So why don't we get anyone that wants to comment on this to send in an email, care of the town manager, and related to this topic, and we'll collate them and see if there's any reason that we think we should broach this subject. But we have been asked by the superintendent whether whether we would whether this issue would be decided. But personally, it's also a Board of Health decision on their part too. I don't. They had mentioned that it's a building inspector issue, but I think it's not really a building inspector issue at the moment. It's a Board of Health's issue, and we can comment on it ourselves, but I also wouldn't want to countermand the wishes of the Board of Health either. So
we're telling small Boy Scout troops that they can't use our facility and conduct, some whatever they conduct, right? But we, might consider having basketball in our facilities. And the reason why they're asking us and they want paid school is because the high school gym, with the ventilation and whatever that's going on down there, they can't even entertain it down there because of that. That's why it's coming back to us, Newbury, and I think the other towns also.
I didn't see is there any kind of time stipulation that the superintendent wanted an answer, or I didn't see one. Was there, or?
Yeah, there was, and I want to say it was in about 2 weeks. And that was why we had kind of added this information, even though it came in, very late in the process just last week. But yeah, I think it's because it's coming up on when decisions would need to be made in terms of leagues, because what we're talking about here is, these non-school leagues.
Right, but so would I'm just asking the question in terms of, I'm not agreeing with it or disagreeing with it. Would these be like high school? Is the request for like people from the middle school or the high school playing intramural basketball, or would these be the Cape Ann League games? Would there be teams from Newburyport and Georgetown and everywhere else? I don't know. Didn't really say.
Yeah, just said.
I think
out of town. Angus, I see there's a date here, December 14th, and it says MIA is planning on starting on December 14th. So that's.
Mm-hmm. And that's another, now you bring that up, Rick, that's another thing too, that I think we need to have a discussion about it as a board and with our health department. Definitely, because there's a lot of mixed messages by people that are out there. So I think we need to sit and I guess Paul's doing a lot of research this week about that. Of course, MIAA, they say, oh yeah, we're playing because, they're, quite honestly, I don't believe that, they want to get the kids playing money wise or whatever wise it is. But I don't think they're taking, the safety and the precautions that are necessary that have been set out by the state and the local Board of Health. So I think there's a big message just because they're a big organization and they say it's okay to play and they want kids to play. I'm not sure if their motives are the same as ours would be or, the state's would be. That is the MMA, if I'm not mistaken, that's not that's not a state agency. That's kind of a whatever.
It's a private organization.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was a for-profit or non-profit, but yeah, it's a private organization, but people think it's a state thing, but it really isn't. That's my point. So I think there's a lot of miscommunication. So to go to your point, Archie, I think we do need to have the discussion, but I think we should have it in the format that I suggested, or if somebody else has a different suggestion, but kind of like that if anybody has any real questions or concerns and some real good evidence, do it in writing. We can put it over to our health department and whomever we need to put it over with to get some good concrete answers and then have that discussion. Just like one discussion. Who is it? High school? Is it the intramural leagues that are all of our kids played in that are mixed towns? Is the high school asking us if they could use Page School because they can't use the high school gym? Those are a lot of questions too that we need to have answered.
Angus, is the Board of Health meeting tomorrow?
No, they actually meet a week from tomorrow. So I was going to suggest that, I think they will have this on their agenda for the regularly scheduled meeting on December 8th.
So bring up if you get any correspondence, share it with them, and then, broach the subject of after their meeting that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Health we can have, even no matter what the thought is, we have a short informational meeting with the two boards, but after their meeting.
Okay.
Is there any other sports that we can take up at that time too, so we don't have to have a multitude of these meetings? Is there anything? I mean, I understand basketball. I guess I assume that is all winter sports eventually going to come around, or is this just basketball? You know what I mean? There's wrestling or hockey. I guess, hockey doesn't use one of our facilities. They play, I think, in Haverhill. But
well, I did get a call from Mike Tyson yesterday. He wanted to.
Somebody posted, I didn't watch the fight, but somebody posted that Snoop Dogg was doing the commentary, and he said it was like a couple of his uncles fighting at a barbecue. Okay, so I would ask that question too, just so we can, you understand, you know what I mean, Angus?
Yes. Yep.
Yes, just so we don't have to keep on, opening up the wound, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, and as you know from the materials in the packet, the answer that's been provided right now is no. No, the facilities would not be available because that's been the policy and the practice. We've been very consistent about it. And, but, with that said, we said, if we do expect the elected boards to look at that and make sure that continues to reflect policy. And so the Board of Health will talk about it a week from tomorrow. And, I think if they were to recommend something different, then I know the Board of Selectmen would take that into account. But, sitting here today, I agree with the comments that have been made, including, Rick, your comment that all of the headlines, I mean, all of the information we're seeing, things are going in the other direction, not the direction of opening things up at this time, unfortunately.
Yeah, nobody's happy about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Our next item on the agenda is a public hearing with the Board of Assessors, to the FY21 tax classification hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to open the 2021 tax classification hearing.
Well, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hang on. I can get my paper.
How are we running this? How are we running this? I know there's some assessors that need, one that needs to go to another meeting, so we probably should try to.
All right, so the, votes that you would be asked to take would be to adopt a single tax rate. The recommendation is to not adopt the open space discount, to not adopt the residential exemption, and to not adopt the small commercial exemption. And then we went further with that with the estimated FY21 tax rate, which we'll get into that discussion as well, but that's not actually the vote, because that all depends on how it plays out through DOR. Although we do have I think a good estimate of what the tax rate would need to be.
To give a little history on it, are we doing, those recommendations, are those the same as they were recommended last year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just for everybody, that was kind of a
Yep.
rhetorical question.
I'll
Okay.
I'll make the motions and then we can start the discussion.
Perfect.
I would make a motion to adopt a single tax rate for all classifications. I would vote to not adopt the open space discount. I would make a motion to not adopt the residential exemption, and I would make a motion to not adopt the small commercial exemption.
The second one, Archie, you didn't say adopt, you said vote. I don't know if that matters.
Yeah, okay.
So I just want to make, just in case somebody looks back and we do it properly. So I would second that with that friendly amendment of adopt rather than vote.
Could we ask the Board of Assessors to give their reasoning behind each of their recommendations?
Sure. I guess if nobody else is going to speak. The primary reason is that almost all of our tax base is residential. We have very little commercial, and as a result, statistically, if we did a split tax rate, we could vastly increase the taxes on the commercial and make very little difference in the residential rate. So that's why we make that recommendation.
The open space one, Rick?
Tom, do you know much about that? The open space discount?
The open space discount, if we do that one, it actually increases the residential tax rate. And it doesn't affect commercial or industrial or personal property. It does affect residential.
Okay, because the burden pushes off from the open, excuse me, from the open space to the residential, then because the burden's always there. It just depends on how we distribute the burden.
Correct.
So Maureen, or whoever on the board, can you just explain what the open space, what properties or what type of land the open space, besides open space, how is open space defined in this case?
Zero, right? There's no land in that classification. Is that right, Maureen?
Right. We only have the open space would typically be like the chapter land or the green belt, that type of thing. But if we did, it would increase the the residential.
Because that land would then be completely untaxed as opposed to reduced tax rate, it would be completely untaxed?
It can go, I think it's up to 25%.
And that already chapter land already is significantly discounted off.
Right. I'm not arguing it. I think it's important to fully understand.
Correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you say it's 25%, you mean it would be 25% of the current
Discounted.
Yeah, it would be discounted 25% or it would be discounted 75%?
It would be discounted and up to another 25%.
I see. Okay.
And then that would go to, if we did have it, it would go to residential.
Okay.
That
Okay.
up to that 25%.
Okay. Thanks.
Just so people know, West Newbury is very, we have no commercial property. Over 97% of our revenue comes from comes from revenue. So anything we're doing is, as Rich mentioned, is at the margins. It's all, everything is related to residential property. And so any of these other things are basically rounding error. And that's not true in other communities where a third of the tax base could be commercial. It's not in West Newbury.
Yeah, I think it's only like 30% in Massachusetts have split rates. It's only 30% of the towns.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty clear that there would be, no significant difference if we had a split rate on at least on the commercial or industrial.
I think the important fact of all the information being presented is that the recommendations from the Board of Assessors are long dated recommendations that precede any of the three current assessors. So these were the same recommendations that were brought to the selectmen when I was a selectman. So it's about consistency.
Right. Yeah, and Tom, I'm asking a question not to argue, but just because I think it's important that whoever's interested in hearing, like, hear it.
Yep, completely understood. Yep.
And on the, do you know the background on the choice to not adopt the residential exemption?
I think I can speak to that as well. It's that one's kind of tough. We don't really have a lot of summer homes here, so it really we'd be giving it would be hard to distinguish between who's a full-time resident and who isn't, and it really wouldn't make that much of a difference anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think Dave talked about that previous years. Because I believe down in Rockport and a few other communities, they do have that in place, but in West Newbury, we just don't have the resources to be able to collect that information.
And there aren't that many properties anyway that would be vacation homes, so it would be.
Right.
Yeah, it would really be people that perhaps might be in Florida 7 or 8 months a year and here 4 months a year. That might be a qualification.
So, any further discussion on this?
Yeah, I just have just a little bit of discussion. I just wanted to thank Maureen and the Board of Assessors for coming up with this material. I know we've had a switch in personnel, and this has been seamless. Great information tonight. It seems like we had more information tonight than prior years that was given to us when the questions were asked. I just want to thank Maureen and the Board of Assessors and Angus for getting all this together. It was seamless, and thank you, Maureen.
Thank you.
Great.
Further discussion? All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Kemper, aye.
Parker, aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
Do we want to just talk about the tax rate? Even
Information
though
about
that's,
the actual numbers now, yeah.
yeah, let's talk about the numbers, even though that's not, formally part of the vote, because that all derives from the values and the approved budget and so forth. But, starting on the second page of the packet on this topic, you see my office is recommending a tax rate of 1493. That would be a significant increase from FY20, and the memo outlines the reasons for that. We knew going in that it would go up, and this is actually not the worst case scenario of what we thought it might be, a few weeks or a month ago, but it will be a noticeable increase for homeowners, and we're certainly sympathetic to that. So the main factors, as outlined in the memo, the overall cost increase. Obviously, that's going to drive the need to raise revenue. The second is the reduced one-time offsets of the tax rate. So while there was the overlay surplus transfer, which was extremely helpful, and that, for rough numbers, every 10,000 to offset the tax rate translates to about a penny on the tax rate. So without that 220,000, we'd be looking at about 22 cents more, roughly. So that was very, very helpful. But we need to keep in mind, as we knew last fall when this vote was approved, that $400,000 transfer on the FY20 tax rate from free cash did have the effect of kind of artificially reducing the 20 tax rate, which did set us up for more of a jump in FY21. The third major factor that I point to is the COVID impacts on non-property tax revenues. And, we really spent quite a lot of time this summer and fall going through those with a fine-tooth comb and assessing the data constantly based on year to date. And Stephanie and I are comfortable with what we have recommended in terms of projections of non-property tax revenues. And they're not down as far as we thought they might be as recently as a month or so ago. But it is still roughly an 8.5% reduction from last year, when normally those revenues would go up year to year. So that definitely, I estimate that accounts for roughly 12 cents on the tax rate because of those reduced revenues. And then finally, the model I had built last winter based on projections of assessed value and new growth. The projections of new growth I had used actually were ended up being conservative. The actual new growth was pretty significantly above what the 5-year average had been, but the overall increase in assessed values was somewhat lower than the 5-year average because of that big year-to-year increase in FY16. So those 4 factors I point to as kind of the major reasons for the recommended tax rate being what it is. And, underlying all this, of course, is the new high school. And, we've known right along that would play out in people's tax bills. But there's a lot of data, that we've given to you. You've got the full recap, and, I could point to individual, data cells in there that, it's just a number, but, many, many hours of analysis and, chewing on it and circulating it among staff and making sure we're confident with the numbers. So, we could drill down on any of this if you have questions, but the memo I put together was intended to highlight the main points.
Angus, I would just ask one question. Maybe Stephanie knows also. How is the town doing lately in terms of late payments or non-payments on the residential tax bills? Are we seeing any kind of a bad shift that in the last 6 months or so, or not?
Stephanie, do you want to comment? I'll just preface. I don't know, Stephanie, you can add to this if you want to, but I do talk to the treasurer collector, regularly on where collections are compared to where we would expect. And while some people have paid a little bit later, there's not, nothing that is, alarming. In some instances, the treasurer collector has entered into some payment agreements, which basically, people still are paying their full tax over the course of the year, but if they pay regular installments every month on time, the treasurer collector will agree, to waive penalties and to not pursue foreclosure if the property falls behind. So, I think there's somewhat more of that this year than in a normal year, but I think collections haven't lagged much behind what you would see in a normal year. Stephanie, do you have anything beyond that, or?
I don't really have anything additional to say. We are pretty much on target. As Angus said, we're a little bit slower than in the past, but we are getting all of the revenues in that department for that category.
But I'd be happy to have the treasurer collector put together a little report for the board's next meeting, so you can see for yourself where the numbers are and what they were, for instance, last year at this time.
Okay. So all things considered, considering the state of the financial world in some aspects, the town is doing okay. Sort of say that.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot fewer, we're, at least in the short term, we're less susceptible to some of the challenges in the overall economy because, with the heavy residential tax base as opposed to, a more urban area that's, deriving more non-tax or non-property tax revenues is going to see, direct hit on, whether that's, meals tax or hotel tax, those kinds of things. We don't have those variables.
Okay, anyone have any further questions for the Board of Assessors? The Board of Assessors have any questions for us, or we all good? Thank you all. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, everybody, for job well done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Our next item is just a brief update regarding the proposed 40B project at Coffin Street and Main Street. Angus, do we have any, do we know anything about how were there any issues with the large, I know it's not a perk test, but the water pumping and that test, did that cause any issues for anybody?
No, it did not. As far as the best information we have, it did not. That test was completed 2 Fridays ago. It went into a 5th day. It was initially thought to be a 4-day test. It did go into the 5th day. Our water superintendent was present every day and oversaw the tie-in and the metering of the water. And, we weren't made aware of any real issues with that.
Angus, do you know why it went to a 5th day? Why they had to go past the original plan?
Nope. The only real new information I have, and the first one isn't new, but I'll just restate it just so everyone's, I know I've said this at prior meetings, but the Conservation Commission will open its public hearing on the ANRAD application on December 7th, which is a week from tonight. So that's not, no application has been submitted for a development. So this is not the public hearing on an order of conditions. It's the public hearing on the resource area delineation. So that's just all parties agreeing to where the resources are, where the delineations are. So that hearing will open a week from tonight, which I know I've said before, but just, confirming that. And then other than that, no applications come in. We do have new regulations that the Board of Appeals adopted in June and then amended in early July. So those are on the town website. And there's a checklist to make sure that, any applicant would be clear on the town's requirements and the documentation required. But at this time, nothing's been submitted. We've also continued to work with staff to make sure that if there is a filing that comes in, that we've got a good web page set up that we can get information posted promptly and make sure to keep people, fully apprised of information.
At this point, would entertain any questions from the public? Anybody that wants to address this topic?
I have a question, Archie.
Okay, Glenn.
To go back on the Concom hearing, you said it opens, and how long do they generally open for? How long does that process take? Just
Mike may want to elaborate, but I will say this one's going to be a little different than ANRADs that the commission has reviewed in the past, for the reason that the commission has made the decision. It's my understanding that they are going to be engaging a third-party wetland scientist who will peer review the delineations that the developers, wetland scientists had submitted. Typically, the Concom itself would do that kind of review itself, but given the size of the property and some other factors, they've decided to retain a third-party wetland scientist. I think that's a smart move. Any costs of that would be borne by the applicant, not by the town. And that gives everybody a third-party qualified consultant to make sure that the delineations are definitive. So because of that, they're going to need to retain that consultant, scope out the work, get the funds, hire the consultant. They got to do their work. So I think that's going to mean it will take longer than a normal ANRAD hearing. But whether that, I wouldn't speculate on how long that may take. I don't know if Mike has anything to say, but I doubt he would speculate on that either. But the most important thing for people to understand, and I know the Board of Selectmen, you guys understand this, but it's just very important that, we're really clear. This isn't the permit application. This isn't the order of conditions. This is the, what should be a fairly objective process of determining the boundaries of the protected resources.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The DEP supervised the water testing that went on at the site on the property. Will the town be requesting the DEP report?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments on this topic? If not, we will move on. Our next item is the Cable Advisory Committee wants to discuss some of the use of their PEG funds. I saw Kevin on there. Are you going to talk about it, Glenn, or is Kevin going to talk about it, or?
I'll be talking about it.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah, so probably everyone on this call is familiar with the PEG funds, but maybe not a whole lot of folks beyond us. It's the fee, 3% fee that everyone who subscribes to cable gets on their bill, public education and government fee. And it mostly has been underutilized, mostly because we don't have a whole lot of funds to make a sustainable cable program that you see in other towns. And up until about a few years ago, the fund, which right now has about 140,000, although Angus will confirm that, and it accrues at about $12,000 a quarter. And up until a few years ago, that fund didn't really exist. Every year, whatever funds we had got spent, either initially buying all the equipment to make the broadcast to the cable of the Selectmen meetings and the cameras and what have you. But then it would be, the funds were swept into free cash for probably at least 10 years. And it's only really been accruing for a few years. But nonetheless, I joined the board to potentially explore ways that fund could be utilized for, community investment. And we, talked a couple of weeks ago at the Cable Advisory Committee to, try to have a process where we talk to the stakeholders of the town, different boards, town boards, nonprofits, historical, et cetera, of, potential ideas or feedback to use it. I know that, my experience from the Bicentennial Committee and making the Voices of West Newbury piece for the Pentucket Arts Foundation, there was a lot of good feedback on family history, town history. And I know that there's always been a lot of talk about, a cross-generational kind of community effort or community center. And, frankly, myself, I think there is some possibilities of utilizing, small resources that can, maybe teach the young and old of the community on how to use media skills to preserve, family pictures, family history. So anyways, that's why we're here, to at least present to the board that we would like to, open that process and get feedback and ideas. And we're coming to you for your thoughts, questions, and approval.
I guess my first question is, so these, the funds are now in a revolving account that unless a purchase is made or some services are paid for, that it doesn't get,
They stay in there in
Get
perpetuity.
swept away. Well, Angus can address that or talk to that.
it continues to build up every year, though. That's the question. Yes.
Well, we used to sweep it, but Angus can speak to it.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually, Kevin, I was really surprised to hear you say that, because that's, and Stephanie, I'd be interested in your thoughts. In every community I've ever worked in, these funds stay in the PEG account until they're used for eligible purposes. So
I think Mike's the one to speak to that, because we set up this account, this revolving fund like we've done with the rec program, so that wouldn't happen. Correct?
Well, yeah, I will say definitively that we've been getting funds since the, 2006, 2008, maybe. And, we've only made limited purchases in that time. And, so I'm almost positive we if we had kept it in one account, we'd have a pretty good nest egg. Let's just put it that way.
Kevin, you said it's about $12,000 a quarter right now that's accruing?
Yeah,
Correct.
I think it might be on the low end. Yeah.
So ballpark close to $50,000 a year, somewhere close to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
but there are expenditures that go out of that on a routine basis, including, the cost to record and transmit these in other public meetings.
Yeah.
And some equipment recently, like the big screen that we have in the hearing room, so we could provide, but nothing that would deplete it. Kevin's correct in the sense that it used to get swept away, but that shouldn't be. That's not what we're here tonight. That was just more informational.
Yeah,
we kind of wanted to. This was kind of a vision that we've been thinking about independently, and then came together as a cable advisory board, and just kind of wanted to share it with you, just to make sure that you guys didn't have any questions and/or concerns before we moved forward.
Because again, all we're asking to do move forward is to have conversations.
Yeah, no, I think it's
Correct.
a neat idea. A neat idea. I think neat ideas could be developed is maybe the way to phrase it. And it's unique in that we have funding before we have an idea.
Well, I have an idea. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can actually think of one idea. So,
but I want to open it. I want to make sure it's an open process, even though I might.
But anytime,
and there might be unspoken for space becoming available. You never know.
Oh, really?
Correct. Yeah. So, but anytime we've done something like this, not as a cable advisory, but as a town or even independent groups, as in the Arts Foundation commissioned some history type of thing. Everybody in town has always said, let's do more, let's do more, let's do more. And we, this is the time that we finally listened enough that we're going to take some first steps of trying to, document, try to get some history, try to get it, in one place for this town.
Would you entertain, the idea would be that you would entertain different proposals and then Or,
Yeah, I mean, well, my idea would be to have a report at the end. And whether we have recommendations or not, I don't know if that's the point, because we are the advisory board. You guys, I mean, I think ultimately the process might, I don't know if it goes before the town meeting. I don't know if it goes just before the Board of Selectmen, but if I have the only idea, no one else has ideas, they just have, input, that's great. But if there are some people that step forward and say, hey, let's do this, I mean, I'd like to have them write their portion, their idea. I don't want to I want to make it open process and incorporate that in the report and, give it to you guys. This is my, this is my general idea. Give it to you guys. This is what we found out. This is who we've talked to. This is our, we've talked to people in the stakeholders of like the historical commission, the library, the Parks and Rec folks, I don't know if there's Boy Scout, Girl Scout, the education side. I mean, we did in the past give a donation to the school system, and the superintendent at the time, I think this was around 2010.
Cable advisory, you mean, did, just so.
Well, I mean, the town.
I understand, but I want to make sure, not the cable advisory, I'm sorry, it came out of the
Well,
PEG grants. I want to make sure the people understand what you're saying, that's all.
Okay, that the PEG money was $5,000 of the PEG money was given by the Board of Selectmen to the Pentucket, school system, as I think did Groveland and Merrimack. And with hope, with a hope that actually we did fund the initial video program that's going on. I trust still at the school, but I know there was one idea counter to mine would be to give it to the schools, and because the E in PEG is education, but there wasn't this is 10 years ago or whatever, so I don't want to revisit that, but that didn't move in that direction. To make a long story short, there was too many obstacles in your normal challenges for a regional system for that to get traction. So no, I mean, I do want to make sure that even though I do have an idea, I want to make sure that other people feel they got a fair hearing before the board. Before whoever makes the decision, whether it's the Board of Selectmen, whether it's a town meeting, whether it's whoever.
I think we should, put a couple sentences on the town website too, that to sort of, so that.
Well, we planned on coming to you guys before, and then having a subsequent meeting of the Cable Advisory Committee, and asking people if they wanted to come there too, to ideas, but then have something get drafted up, then presented back to you guys, to us, to then go out to the website, to go out to that, informational thing that we send out for emails that people sign up to, and that we just wanted to see if you guys were, if we were, at least go to the next step.
Yeah, we didn't want to go out and either on Facebook or emails and say, hey, this is what we'd like to hear from you, without going before the Board of Selectmen and you guys knowing what we're doing. And, I don't know whether you take a vote on saying, yeah, that, you can go look at it, or whether we just orally talk about it. And, yeah, I mean, put posts on the town website, any email, I want to reach out to all the different, organizations, the heads of the different boards, at least to, be on record that we sent it out to them.
So does it seem like, just maybe a straw vote that we could go back as a Cable Advisory Committee, have another meeting, and then come up with some things that we could post, and then at least start something? Then we could come back with a more formal thing that Kevin had talked about before, like a report at the end of exactly what we've gathered from people, the ideas from people, and then have a real formal presentation back to the board.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you. Take care.
I'll
Yeah.
post the meeting for next week. I'll talk to you about that.
Yes, and we're also on for the,
Oh, the 7th. Yes, correct. We wanted to be part of that also. Correct. You're right.
great. See you guys.
Bye. Next item is to just prepare a tiny bit for our meeting next week. So on Monday, December 7th at 6 p.m. We plan to have a meet at 6, not 7. We plan to have a meeting where committees would present their one or two priority items of purchases or plans or just what's new in
Personnel.
personnel, it's basically new things that would be might affect the workings of the town, might be something that uses up a lot of staff time, might be something that the board or committee would be needing additional funds for, new initiatives in whatever capacity. So I think it would be helpful that everyone knows what the town as a whole is up to, and it would also be helpful because we're heading into FY 2021. I mean 22. Wow. Budget time. So if there's something that's going to be, again, a new initiative that might be a capital purchase or a personnel increase, things that might affect the budget or decrease the things.
Like a grant. If somebody sees a huge grant in a pipeline next year, and this would be the time to kind of tell us about it when we're doing the budgeting time.
Exactly. So we just want, it's just sort of like, it's preparing everyone in dealing with the budget, Angus and the finance committee and the board of selectmen, but also to just sort of as informational purposes, so that everybody knows what other people are thinking about, so that maybe we're not being redundant about things even. So that's the thinking behind it. Any committee that wants to make a presentation, that's fine. We would ask that the keep it short, 3 minutes at the maximum, and then maybe that amount of time for a little bit of discussion and questions, and then on to the next committee. So that's the idea behind it.
Do we have anybody signed up already, Angus?
We've heard from some
Cable advisory.
yeah, and I know. Well, let's see. I heard from Wendy Reed, so I don't know which of the several boards and committees she's on that she was representing, but I know that I know the word's gotten out there, and I do think we'll have good attendance, good participation. I've also been working with department heads to make sure that, I can put in front of you guys, and this may end up being more of a written report than a presentation, because I don't want to bog down the limited time for next week, but we will be putting together a report on what's kind of what's going on already, because I think it's important to start with that as context for anything new that could be taken on. So
I think if people are listening in at the time, if it isn't too lengthy, it would be worthwhile to go over that too, Angus.
Yeah. I'll definitely have a presentation at the beginning. I just want to definitely keep it, to a limited period of time, but there can be backup documentation behind that I would intend to circulate broadly, because like Archie said, I think one of the, real great objectives that can come out of a meeting like this is to share information so there's better clarity among the many aspects of town government of what each other are working on.
So Glenn, and partly an answer to Glenn's question, both the Energy Advisory Committee and the MVP core team are meeting sort of back-to-back meetings this Wednesday night to, sort of early unplanned, previously unplanned meetings, just to get our thoughts together for next week's meeting. So both of those groups or committees, you can expect some feedback from, Angus.
Okay, that's good. Hopefully it'll be productive. Meetings, for the sake of meetings, we don't want to do that.
Well, I will tell you, we did have a department head meeting, or really actually a broad staff meeting. It was very open to anybody. And we did so we had a number of, basically every department was represented when we met last Tuesday. And while this was just one of 7 or 8 topics that were covered, I did get a lot of very positive feedback from staff about this meeting and about, the value of a meeting like this. So I do know, at least at the staff level, there's a lot of, sense that this is great and they're glad that the board is doing this. And I think it's going to be helpful.
Angus didn't tell you that about the plans for a 15-story new town hall.
That's the big reveal. Come on, Archie. That's going to bide my time on that one.
With the cell tower on top.
Going to be the West Newbury Needle.
So the town hall on top of the cell tower is more like it, because that way the slings and arrows can't reach us up that high.
I know we voted down that cell tower before, but one of my cafeterias in Billerica, they have a cell tower they just sold the building. One of the reasons why the owner bought it was the revenue is between $250,000 and $300,000 a year for that cell tower.
With no heavy lifting.
No, nothing. You don't pay for anything. You just give them the land.
Okay. So just a brief discussion of the timeline for the budget process. Angus, you want to go over that?
Yep. So as you know, every year, we put together a packet that we send out to all the department heads and the board and committee and commission chairs, or at least those who have budgets, to set out kind of a uniform process and timeline. Typically, the Board of Selectmen's adoption of its annual policy direction precedes that, but the board, discussion of FY22 policy direction for the budget will take place 2 weeks from tonight on the 14th. And I don't want to wait to get the packet out. Last year, actually the last 2 years, it went out, more toward, like, I think it was December 17th, maybe right around there. That's right before the holidays. I really want to get it into people's hands as soon as I can, ideally even by the end of this week if I can. I don't know if I can because it takes time to put it together and there's a lot of other things that need to happen this week. But the point is, I want to get that packet out as soon as I possibly can. That will set out a timeline. The adoption of the policy direction is a really important part of that. So rather than including that in the packet, which I've done in the past, I would send out the packet and then say, this will be set on the 14th, and we'll send the policy direction out after that. Because the fact is, there's plenty that people can do that's without that, because some amount of preparing the budget is fairly routine. So that'll be 2 weeks from tonight. Also 2 weeks from tonight is the presentation of the FY20 audit. Tony Roselli will be here for that. So that's really, the timing hasn't aligned like that in the past years, but I think that's going to work out pretty well because, the board will have a detailed presentation on how the prior fiscal year ended up, which I think is a nice jumping off point to talk about the FY22 budget process.
So Angus, I would just say, even before then, so have it so that Tony is allowed to be here first, and so he doesn't have to hang.
Definitely. Yeah, that's definitely how I would do it. And I'm also working with Stephanie on putting together some data for the board and, for anyone who wants it, on 5-year trends for the prior 5 years, including the current year, so that you have really clear information in front of you on what have been the budget drivers, both upward and downward. Not many have gone down, but some have, like debt service. But, you know, we're putting that together into a succinct kind of, ideally like a one pager, maybe it'll be 2 pages, but it'll have, you'll have all of the data on what the actual expenditures were per department on the prior 4 years, and then with the current year budget. So that'll give you some good insight on what the trends would do if carried forward with no change. Obviously, the reason you set a policy direction is that you might, you know, set a change in direction, but if you don't, we can project, you know, what that normal trend line would look like if you just carried it forward, you know, another year or a couple of years, which obviously isn't what we do, but just as a starting point, I think that will be interesting to people.
Angus, if you're going to give us that, could you, I know it isn't a full, it's not till December 31st yet, but maybe it would be helpful to see what, and I know some budgets don't spend, they spend it all in 1 month or whatever, but by the same token, it's still useful to see, to at the same time on that, can you do the to year to date, you know, on?
Yeah. Oh, that's a snap. That's easy to add to that. That's no trouble at all.
Okay.
Yeah. And we do that internally, you know, very often. You know, Stephanie will run me a year to date report. I'll plug that into my Excel workbook and kind of eyeball where we are compared to how far we are into the year. And like you said, some of them don't follow that, you know, because of, you know, there's lump sum payments or that kind of thing. But on spending, you know, that gives us a good barometer that we do.
Personnel kind of does follow the monthly.
Yes, it very much does follow. Correct. So, I mean, while we are going to have that on 2 weeks from tonight, and I'm certainly not looking for the board to, you know, set direction tonight. If you do, if anyone, since we are on the topic, if you do want to throw out any ideas, you know, or things, you know, you think you might want to put out there for FY22 direction, you could do that. Although I just noticed we do have an attendee who's raised her hand, which is very polite. So I want to acknowledge that. So Ann O'Sullivan has raised her hand. So with chair's consent, do you want to hear what she has to say?
Yes.
So Ann, you're muted. So if you got to unmute yourself.
Unmute. There we go. So I would just like to let you guys know, I'm sure through social media, you've seen that I've been working sort of in a grassroots effort toward this affordable housing situation. And I've talked with Leah, the town planner, as well as Marty Mason, who is a local resident, who's actually on the board for land acquisition for Habitat for Humanity, as well as Megan, who is the executive director of Habitat for Humanity. And they're all very excited about working with the town toward developing an affordable housing plan based on, obviously, the situation with the current 40B development. And so I'm only expressing this in terms of encouraging you, in terms of a budgetary process, to consider increasing the planning board's budget, because my feedback from Leah is that she is pretty much dealing with permits, and she's in a reactionary position as opposed to being a proactive position, which I think is what the town really needs. So I mean, I have obviously a lot more to say on this, but just in terms of tonight, in terms of the budgetary issues you guys are dealing with, I hope that you would consider increasing the planner's hours so that we can more aggressively attack these 40B positions. And So that's it.
Would that be something, Angus, that the planning board, if they want to consider that, should be bringing up at the 7th meeting?
I think so. I mean, it's certainly not anyone's last bite at the apple in terms of budget prep, because when, people submit it, but I think it would be very good, the earlier people give notice of those kinds of things, the better. So yeah, I think if the planning board intended to propose that, it would be great to hear about that.
Well, and so pretty much that's my goal here tonight, is to encourage Ray and the planning board to advocate for increasing her hours, because she clearly, in our discussions with Habitat for Humanity, they're definitely interested in helping out this town. But we're going to need her help to do that. And she does not have currently the hours to do that. So I'm just kind of calling you guys out on that. So.
Let me ask, I don't know if Angus or Mike might be the person to ask about this. What about in terms of using the housing part of
Yes.
CPA.
to do that? Is that
Yeah.
is that possible?
Yes, Leah has actually, well, Angus, you can address this obviously, but Leah has also pointed out the fact there's about 100 grand, correct me if I'm wrong, of money that also could be tapped into starting this process of developing a response to this 40B. I mean, the town is out of control. People are so upset about this. And we tried a number of years ago to address this, and nobody was interested then, but there's clearly motivation now for some proactive addressing of this issue.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of
You're talking about the money that's been collected in lieu of that money. I think you're talking about that, correct?
I'm talking about the CPA money that is required to be designated for affordable housing. And
Right. But there's another pot of money that's been collected in lieu of people, the developers from the.
I'm not, I don't know about that. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, I think that kind of represents like fractional amounts for houses that, the development wasn't large enough to have to develop a full. Is that correct, Angus? So
that's correct. Yeah. So there's everyone's correct. So there's buckets of money. The CPC certainly could be, that would be eligible, and probably even would be, I certainly can't speak for the CPC, but I think would be eligible for use of administrative funds, which, is a kind of a lower, it's easier for the committee, can authorize it. It doesn't need to go to town meeting. So if the committee did want to put some funds toward, for instance, the soft costs associated with, for instance, a housing plan, I think that would be within their discretion to do that. Before we get to that point, it's important for everyone to know the CPC did meet was it last week? No, 2 weeks ago with the holiday. And every year they update the community preservation plan. And we do have a new staff person. I've been working with her very closely, and they are going to be working on the update of that plan over the next couple of community preservation committee meetings. And I think we all feel that the housing section in particular of that plan could really be strengthened. So I think you can expect that that's going to happen. That's already underway with staff efforts and with the CPC. So that's going to be good. And I think that can help guide decisions the CPC makes on what types of projects to fund, whether with administrative funding or with recommendations for projects. And then the separate bucket of money that Archie's referring to is this fee in lieu, and Rick is correct that the funds have largely been fractional units. So if the math doesn't equal a whole unit, then they'll put a proportional amount of money. And so the balance is into the low six figures at this point. And I've been working with Leah and Mike on a sporadic basis for a while. We haven't gotten it to the stage of approving anything, but what needs to happen there is some regulations to set out the allowable uses for those funds and the process that needs to be followed, because the way the bylaw is written it has kind of a convoluted process. So that work is also underway, and Leah prepared an initial draft of that earlier this fall. So we're looking to unlock those funds. And but as far as, I don't know if tonight's the night to go into a whole lot of detail, but, it should be noted, we do have an approved housing plan that was voted in June 2018, and that's good for 5 years. So we do have a housing plan. And if what I'm hearing, Ann, at least, from your perspective, it sounds like, part of what's driving that is an intent to be more proactive on 40Bs. And, unfortunately, it is a tough framework because the housing production plan does have to show, as ours does, enough production every year to get out from under 40B. And, people do need to understand that if let's say 25% of a given development is affordable, that means to get to that production level of 8 units a year, you're talking about building about 32 units a year, plus the A&R lots, which don't really add to, contribute to that. So, call it 32 to 35 units a year. And we've averaged about 15 or 16 units a year. So, I think just to be realistic, people need to understand that to have a housing plan that is certified, you do need to accommodate significantly more development annually than what we have seen for the last 10 years. So I've seen this in a lot of communities, and I've seen communities tear themselves apart doing these housing plans, and people maybe expect that it's going to be a silver bullet and mean less development. And when people realize that, no, it actually means more development, sometimes people's opinions about housing plans change. So I'm just leading with that because, people need to understand that, because that's the law. So.
Well, I think the amazing thing that I discovered when I started this Facebook conversation was that I didn't need to reinvent this wheel. The wheel has been developed. The housing plan was in place, and it was just a matter of prioritizing it. So I think that's what my push is going to be. My conversations with Habitat for Humanity, they're not interested in mega developments. They're not interested in buying existing homes to rehabilitate them one by one. But I mean, if you guys look back to the Mullen property, when we recommended that, it was clearly too big, too much for this town. But that's a property that's centrally located, that maybe doesn't need 140 units or whatever it was back then, but it's a property that works for elderly people. It's close to the town center. It's something that we could at least start with and start to address this plan that's already in place. We don't need to reinvent this wheel. So this is not that I'm going off on a tangent. This is not the time or place for this, but I'm just letting you guys know that I've got a lot of people who are really interested in this. And for budgetary purposes, the only reason for my comment tonight is because Leah, I think, is a really valuable resource for this town. And if the planning board hasn't advocated for increasing her hours, I will tonight. So thanks, guys, for listening.
Thank you, Ann.
Thanks, Sam.
Take care.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks.
Bye.
Next item, we have minutes for October 19th. Anyone make a motion? I'm fine with them.
I move to accept what was that? October 4th. What was the date again?
19.
Yeah, I move to accept the minutes from October 19th as written. It looked good to me.
I'll second. All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Kemper, aye.
Parker, aye.
A few updates from the town manager. So Angus, I see you've got a sort of a form for the people in terms of signing off on their staff on their telecommuting responsibilities. This isn't because we've had problems, it's just, we're just formalizing things. Is that, would you say that?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And part of, and you may, this will look familiar to you because I brought a draft to the board back in March. I think it was March. And, you know, everyone was pretty comfortable with it at that point, but we never formally rolled it out. There was too much else going on. And part of why I wanted to share it with staff at a meeting last Tuesday was to share it as a draft and make sure people didn't have any big concerns about it before it's finalized and put out, because I think it's in good shape. And I had you know, the board had looked at it and key staff had looked at it a couple of times and everyone felt it was good. But I just wanted to make, you know, I didn't want to do anything that was going to put people on their heels. And I think, and I just, you know, when this all started, we didn't know this would be going on. You know, here we are into the 8th or 9th month, and with probably at least, you know, 6 months or more still ahead of us. So, you know, I think it's just important to have some documentation that goes into people's file. And I think it was very well received. The comments I've gotten back, people see it's very reasonable and makes sense. It's just kind of formalizing what has been more informal.
Angus, I had just one question about one small item. So it says people are responsible for having the high-speed connection or whatever. What has that been a problem? Is there some, maybe there are people that don't have a high-speed connection? Is that have you had any problems with that issue at all?
We have not had any problems with that. And it's, you know, basically the main point there is, you know, if people are working remotely, they, you know, need to be able to perform their job in the way that they would if they were here. And so part of that is connectivity. And part of what this does is it documents that the town's not going to pay, you know, to provide that access to someone's home. So if they're working remotely, then, you know, that's an expectation, is that they would be able to work fully productively remotely. And it has not been an issue whatsoever. It just documents that.
What about the sort of issue of cybersecurity related to that? If someone you know, the servers, the town servers and so forth, are protected to a certain extent from a cyber attack, from hacking and so forth. But what about people's individual, their laptops or the desktop, whatever they're using at their house? What about that issue?
I'm not sure what you mean. What about it's an issue?
Are we putting sort of sensitive material, maybe things that would be protected electronically better in the town hall that are being as opposed to someone's Comcast connection at their house?
Sure. Well, I think the main thing is, you know, people's access to the town servers through a VPN, which is a secure connection. And that's been the same way that, you know, those primarily, you know, some of the
okay, so everyone's connected. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so everything's connected through a secure VPN. And then the second thing that COVID has, you know, the VPN's been in place for years. And so anyone, you know, working remotely or doing extra work on nights or weekends, which a number of department heads have done routinely for many years, have always been through the secure VPN. So that's not new. What is new is that with COVID and with more people working remotely than had been the case pre-COVID, The town has invested in better equipment, specifically laptops, for a number of staff that didn't have laptops. Thankfully, that's all been funded out of the federal CARES funds, so it hasn't actually cost the taxpayer. But that has allowed, as more people have worked remotely, we want to make sure that they're ideally working on a town piece of equipment and not from their home personal computer, partly for the reasons that you raised.
Okay.
So that's part of the goal of the documentation is to get a better census of who's working remotely, how much are they doing remotely, and to make more informed decisions about where we might need. At this point, I think we've covered a lot of bases in terms of buying laptops, including for some part-time people to work remotely because the usage justified it, and frankly, the funds are there with the CARES Act. And that's not something that, we need to know who's doing what remotely so we can make those decisions.
Okay.
So a couple of the other updates in here, we're getting the ball rolling on looking at the personnel policies, put out a call for input on those, which basically constitute 2 bylaws and a set of policies. Started to get some initial comments back from some staff, so that's great. That's a great place to start to try to identify all the issues and concerns, so we can make a good decision about how we want to proceed, whether we want to engage like a consultant on that or labor council or both. So we're looking to, I know, my office has some issues, and the town accountant, Mike McCarron's, raised some issues. So we have a pretty good list of issues, but we wanted to cast a wider net and make sure that we have a good sense of what the issues are as we try to kick off that process of looking at the personnel policies. And related to that, this is not so much, it's not in the personnel policy, but this timesheet policy, this is a minor change that we want to make. So we circulated that to staff, asked for input. I think people, understand, and that's, I think, going to be a really positive change. The way it's been done here for a number of years is really problematic on a practical day-to-day basis, and I think this will make things better. It'll give management more time to review the timesheets rather than the current system where, by the time we get them, it's just people are submitting timesheets for days that haven't yet worked. So it creates a lot of administrative issues week in, week out that I think will make things better. But like I said, with the telecommuting policy, we don't want to just spring it on people. So we circulate the draft policy, get input, and then we'll finalize that based on any comments that we may receive. But so far, the response has been favorable.
Well, Angus, will that give you less time to get the warrants prepared if you're, or there's simply going to be a little bit of a lag between? So if you get the timesheet on Friday morning, when is the pay for that particular pay period going to go out?
Stephanie, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, the paycheck goes out the following Wednesday, so as long as we submit everyone's pay to Harper's by our drop dead date time of 2 p.m. on Tuesday, we will be okay. Right now, currently,
They can do it that fast, okay.
Yeah, right now, currently, people are turning in timesheets on like Tuesday afternoon to Wednesday morning. We're doing the Excel spreadsheet, getting it into Harper's and submitting it early on Thursday morning. So they actually have a ton of time, but they don't need that much time.
Okay.
Harper's doesn't need that much time. So it's been, the workflow has been a certain way, for so many years. But we're actually getting the data to Harper's much sooner than they actually need it. So that kind of puts, Stephanie and me in a bind where, we're getting the timesheets, and it's almost like there's just almost no time to actually do a meaningful review. And then this other issue of the timesheets coming in on Tuesday or Wednesday for a pay period, including the Thursday of that week, means that, you know, if you put in your timesheet Tuesday, you don't know you're going to be sick Thursday, and then you're sick Thursday, so you're out, and then that time the next week has to be reconciled, which creates, you know, a bunch of work for the finance staff to go back and update the records and change where that time was posted. And this has been going on for years, and it's one of these little inefficiencies that's not actually that little. It's actually a pretty major time impact on our office. And so we're saying, you know, the timesheets go in after the pay period or at the conclusion of the pay period, which is like every other organization I've ever heard of. This is, for some reason, it's been done differently here over many, many years. So I've been aware of this for a while. And it's something that, you know, I talked to Lori about when Lori was the town accountant, and we'd been talking about changing it. And then, you know, that shifted, you know, personnel change. And I didn't want to do it till things were kind of stable, you know, with staffing and with everyone gaining traction and everything. So it just seemed like the right time to kind of make this change, because it's something that's actually been an issue for a number of years. So yeah, no board, you know, votes needed. Just want to make you aware of some of what's going on at the administrative level.
Good. That seems like a good change, though.
Yeah. Next item, Archie'd asked for an update on the Soldiers and Sailors building. Not a whole lot to report. You know, I have left you know, a couple of messages with Lynn. So, you know, the ball's in their court. The main thing, you know, we do have a signed contract, but it's not what I would consider fully executed, because we need this updated timeline. And I know, I mean, I've been on the consulting side, and they've got a number of subs. So they need to, you know, they can't just put dates out there, and, you know, they need to work that through their subs and make sure that the dates they're providing can be relied upon. And so, you know, we knew it would take some time to get this attachment A updated that you have in your packet, but that's, you know, the ball's in their court. We've done our part, and you know, trust me, I would love to report that that's done, but we're doing what we can.
So Angus, in the sort of the normal flow of things, when you do hear back from Lynn or from her company, and first meeting is scheduled, you'll be giving us a heads up.
Oh yeah, as soon as we have.
We won't be holding off for a selectmen's meeting to hear that.
No,
yeah, okay.
No, we want to get the work started ASAP, because as you know, the goal is to get the design work done over the winter, so that you know, a bid package could go out, you know, early enough in the spring to hit the contractors before they're already fully booked. So to hit that timeline, you know, we got to get this design moving.
Okay, anyone have any requests for future agenda items?
If we could,
Glenn, we didn't hear that.
meet as the three selectmen and Mike again over managers contract. You hear me?
Yep, we got you, Glenn.
I couldn't understand that. Could you?
Oh, he was saying the town manager contract, to have another meeting with you guys and Mike. So.
Oh, okay, great.
And one other thing I didn't put on.
Sorry, that's so.
One thing I'd forgotten to put on this list, but I'd mentioned maybe a couple of weeks or a month ago, we are going to need to update the hazard mitigation plan this fiscal year. And that may end up being, if MVPC is successful at getting the grant, that may be a regional plan with, you know, that might not be that big a lift. But again, what you get out of it is what you put into it. And if that's going to be a really meaningful plan, that's something that, you know, needs to be on people's radar. And I know that's not a welcome timeline. You know, that's only 7 months away, but it is a federal requirement that if we don't do, we would not be eligible for post-disaster recovery funds on federal disaster declaration. So it really is very important that we get that done this fiscal year.
So Angus, it's possible that, if there's, and I'm not making a commitment for other people, but it's possible that if there's input needed from the community, which undoubtedly there would be, that the MVP court team might be able to contribute somewhat on that.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
Again, I'm not committing for other people, but something to keep in mind.
Well, and that's exactly the spirit. I mean, that's a great suggestion, Rick, and that I think is a big part of the spirit of the meeting a week from tonight is to, once everyone knows what everyone else is working on, then there can be all kinds of synergies of, hey, that's related to what we're working on anyway, and why don't we work together on that? Or why don't we do some of that?
I agree. I mean, to me, that's like half the purpose of this meeting is hoping that we find synergies and
Yes.
realize that we're actually all leaning against the same wall, trying to move it. And if we push together, it'll go.
So hopefully this list is helpful, just so you know what's already kind of on the horizon. Some of it has dates, some of it doesn't.
Angus, I had one question. So I know we voted it at town meeting, but I can't, I just simply can't remember the DLS policy that we wanted to update this year. What one was that, and were we going to have to? We got funds in order to have some, consultant assistance with that, or maybe we sort of have to get that ball rolling because half the year's gone already.
You're talking about at the fall town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, that was on the personnel policies.
Oh, that was the personnel policies. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying, there's HR kind of management consultants. There's also labor council that's, got a, increasing understanding of some of the issues. I don't want to just like hire a consultant and outsource something, until we know exactly what the gap is, based on pooling our existing knowledge. And then, but that's something that, you're right. If we're going to get that done by the end of June, it needs to be formally kicked off very soon. And it kind of,
And especially if we need some professional assistance to do it.
Yeah, I did kind of a soft rollout of that at last week's staff meeting. But yeah, that's going to need to be kicked into high gear, pretty soon.
Okay, any other comments, suggestions? Make a motion to adjourn. Thank you all.
Second,
All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Kemper, aye.
Parker, aye.
Good night, all.
Good night, thanks.